Hello and welcome to Mini Bites. This is week 1, part 2 of Easter in Esther. So if you have your Bibles, please turn to Esther chapter 2 and we will get started. One of the important parts of Esther, one of the outstanding features of the book is, if you'll notice in reading the book of Esther, is you will not see the name of God in the book. That's one of the books of the Bible that does not mention God in the Hebrew text. Another one is the Song of Solomon. However, in the Septuagint, which is the Greek translation of the Hebrew text, God is mentioned one time in chapter 2. But in the Hebrew text, he is not. But you obviously can see his fingerprints throughout. You can see that his providence and his sovereign power is in the fabric of everything that goes on, from the saving of the Jewish people, his chosen people, throughout all of the individual players in the story that is played out as well. If we were to define providence, we could define it like this. Providence is God conceived as the power sustaining and guiding human destiny. So we're going to talk about that today in this mini bite. What is God's providence? And so let's go ahead and start reading Esther chapter 2. So Esther chapter 2, verse 1. Later, when the anger of King Xerxes had subsided, he remembered Vashti and what she had done and what he had decreed about her. So this sounds as if it had just happened. In actuality, between chapters 1 and 2 are some 4 years. We find this out from verse 16. If you just want to glance over here, verse 16, it says, she was taken to King Xerxes. This is, we're skipping ahead in the story. We're going to get to it. This is Esther, which again, we're going to get to. This is 4 years in between. She was taken to King Xerxes in the royal residence in the 10th month, the month of Tebeth, in the 7th year of his reign. In chapter 1, it says, in the 3rd year of his reign, he gave a banquet. So in the banquet, the very banquet where he called for Queen Vashti, which we know the story, and she didn't come to him, and this is what started it all. And she disobeyed his orders, and she was vanquished from his presence and from the throne, took away her crown and all of this that made way for Esther to become queen, and started the turn of events for Esther to become queen. All of this. So that was the 3rd year of his reign. Now this is the 7th year of his reign. So between that time and Esther now becoming being called into his presence is the 7th year of his reign. So now between that time is some 4 years. So it wasn't just the next day, in other words. So about 4 years. We find out from history that he also tried to conquer Greece during this time, which was a failure. So not only did he send away his queen, but he also had a non-victorious war that he tried to do as well. So this is all that happened within 4 years of time. So when it says Later, when the anger of King Xerxes had subsided, a lot has happened during this time. So this is what's going on. Verse 2. Then the king's personal attendants proposed, let a search be made for beautiful young virgins for the king. Let the king appoint commissioners in every province of his realm to bring all these beautiful girls into the harem at the citadel of Susa. Let them be placed under the care of Haggai, the king's eunuch, who is in charge of the women, and let beauty treatments be given to them. Then let the girl who pleases the king be queen instead of Vashti. This advice appealed to the king, and he followed it. Now there was in the citadel of Susa a Jew of the tribe of Benjamin named Mordecai, son of Jair, the son of Shimei, the son of Kish. So this is another major player in our story who had been carried into exile from Jerusalem by Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon. Among those taken captive with Jehoiakim, those taken captive with Joachim, king of Judah. Mordecai had a cousin named Hadassah, whom he had brought up because she had neither father nor mother. This girl, who was also known as Esther, so this is Esther, her Jewish name was Hadassah. Hadassah means myrtle, and Esther means star. Esther was her Persian name. Esther was lovely in form and features, and Mordecai had taken her as his own daughter when her father and mother died. When the king's order and edict had been proclaimed, many girls were brought to the citadel of Susa and put under the care of Haggai. Esther also was taken to the king's palace and entrusted to Haggai, who had charge of the harem. The girl pleased him and won his favor. Immediately, he provided her with her beauty treatments and special food. He assigned to her 7 maids selected from the king's palace and moved her and her maids into the best place in the harem. Esther had not revealed her nationality and family background because Mordecai had forbidden her to do so. So Mordecai, a Jew, and Esther, Hadassah, also a Jew, he told her, do not tell the king that you're a Jew. Let him think you're an orphan and that you are Persian of nationality. So don't tell him that you're a Jew. Don't lie to him, but don't tell him, don't just willingly give him the information that you're a Jew. Verse 11, every day he walked back and forth near the courtyard of the harem to find out how Esther was and what had happened to her. Before a girl's turn came to go into King Xerxes, she had to complete 12 months of beauty treatments prescribed for the women, 6 months with oil of myrrh, and 6 months with perfumes and cosmetics. And this is how she would go to the king. Anything she wanted was given her to take with her from the harem to the king's palace. In the evening, she would go there, and in the morning return to another part of the harem to the care of Ashkenaz, the king's eunuch, who was in charge of the concubines. She would not return to the king unless he was pleased with her and summoned her by name. When the turn came for Esther, the girl Mordecai had adopted, the daughter of her uncle Abihail, to go to the king, she asked for nothing other than what Haggai, the king's eunuch, who was in charge of the harem, suggested. And Esther won the favor of everyone who saw her. So this is important because God's hand was on her life. Again, God not specifically being mentioned, but every detail of these characters that's in this play that is before us it is important that we see that God's hand was on her life, that even every interaction that Esther has with each individual, that God made it to where Esther had favor with everybody that she came in contact with. Verse 16, she was taken to King Xerxes in the royal residence in the 10th month, the month of Tebeth, in the 7th year of his reign. We already talked about this. So actually, it was 3 years when his anger subsided from banishing King Vashti, because then there was a year of preparing Esther with beauty treatments and things. So now a year passed with preparing her. So now it's 4 years after that. In the 7th year of his reign, verse 17. Now the king was attracted to Esther more than to any of the other women, and she won his favor and approval more than any of the other virgins. So he set a royal crown on her head and made her queen instead of Vashti. So again, important. It's not that she wasn't beautiful. It wasn't that she wasn't attractive or anything like this, but God made it so. God put everything into action. He made it so that her personality was such as it was, that she was the right age, the right temperament, at the right place, at the right time, all of these things to put into place this plan of his. This is all about his providence. Again, that his power was sustaining and guiding human destiny and human interaction for his plan to happen. Verse 18, and the king gave a great banquet, Esther's banquet, for all his nobles and officials. He proclaimed a holiday throughout the provinces and distributed gifts with royal liberality. So what's going to happen next, just for the next short few verses we have left of chapter 2, all that we're going to cover today, is going to be very important for what's going to happen next in the next few weeks. This is only going to be a 5-week, 10-part series, but just kind of a spoiler alert if you don't know the story of Esther, that the Jews are going to be saved. It's really a picture of what happens not only in history, but also spiritual Israel, if you will, how we are saved. It's a picture of Easter in Esther, of how we are saved through Christ's resurrection. And in order for this to happen, these events have to take place. Not only Esther being on the throne, but also details, little details, big details. And so there's going to be some details that are small details that have to take place, details that are about to happen next. And so we're going to go through these details, and we're going to see later on how they're going to take place. But just remember how these details will come into place later into the story. Verse 19, when the virgins were assembled a second time, Mordecai, remember Esther's uncle, basically her stepfather, or not stepfather, but her adopted father. When the virgins were assembled a second time, Mordecai was sitting at the king's gate. And so he was sitting at the king's gate. Sometimes that makes us think that he was like a servant, a panhandler or something, but nothing could be further from the truth. Really, Mordecai sitting at the king's gate in this position makes him probably more an officer of the king, that he was sitting at the king's gate awaiting his order. So he was, though he was a Jew, he was kind of an officer more than a panhandler. He was kind kind of a guard of the gate, if you will. So he was sitting at the gate, verse 20, but Esther had kept secret her family's background and nationality, just as Mordecai had told her to do. For she continued to follow Mordecai's instructions as she had done when he was bringing her up. Verse 21, during the time, if you underline things in your Bible, underline time, important. During the time Mordecai was sitting at the king's gate, Bigthana and Teresh, two of the king's officers who guarded the doorway, became angry and conspired to assassinate King Xerxes. But Mordecai found out about the plot and told King Esther, who in turn reported it to the king, giving credit to Mordecai. And when the report was investigated and found to be true, the two officials were hanged on a gallows. All this was recorded in the book of Annals in the presence of the king. So now notice this. This is all, again, going to be really important later on. But notice that this is going to be crucial to the deliverance of the Jews that's still going to be to come. And this is how it's going to be important. So in verse 21, we notice that there was a specific time that Mordecai was sitting there. He could have been getting up and doing a bathroom break or taking a walk. He could have been checking on other things for the king. He could have been doing an errand. He could have been doing all kinds of things, but the specific time he was there in earshot to hear what was going on. It was a specific time that he was there to hear this interaction. And then verse 22, it says that Mordecai found out about the plot and he told Queen Esther. Important that he told Queen Esther. And then, obviously, it's important that Esther was the queen, which that's the whole story, of course, that the queen, that Esther was the queen. That's obvious. And then also in verse 22, that the queen gave credit to Mordecai. It's human nature. And the queen is not oblivious to this. It's human nature to want to take credit, to get brownie points, to get extra, to garner extra favor for herself. She could have very easily said she overheard it, or to not even just give credit to Mordecai, just to get a pat on the back from the king. Because let's remember that though she was the queen, all of these other women were his concubines. She could have taken credit herself, but instead she gave credit to Mordecai. Very important that he got the credit. Also that it was recorded in the annals of the king. That's important, that it wasn't just it was told to him that Mordecai told, that Mordecai got the credit, and that they were hanged on the gallows, and that it was done with. It was taken care of, emergency averted, and we're all good. But that it was also recorded in the annals for future posterity. All of these things are vitally important that they happened, and we're going to see why. So all of that to say that this is all part of God's providence, and we're going to see why. And if we'll allow this to wash over us and to let us realize that God plays a part in our own lives, even when we don't realize it, even when we don't attribute it to God, even when God's name isn't widely displayed, or his name isn't up in lights, that he is in the background. He is moving in our lives. God is providentially working and moving in our lives. He is great. He is worthy to be praised.